A lot of gameplay loops in SC are focused on making piles of space cheddar, but not every profession in game has to be focused on making you the Richie Rich of Stanton. While playing the role of a space medic is unlikely to get you behind the sticks of an 890 jump, it can pay out in interesting encounters and the rewarding feeling of having helped out a fellow player who has likely run into a spot of bad luck. Even though the actual art of reviving a down player doesn't take too much skill or witchcraft, I still thought it was worth putting together a quick guide for people looking to deliver a professional service. Because let's face it, there's nothing worse than a rescue mission turning into 2 rescue missions. So if that sounds good to you, then grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns and today we're going to be looking at the medic's life in Starset. Medical gameplay in SC is still in its relative infancy, with what could be considered as quite basic features. However, despite this, the updates to the loot system seen in recent patches have meant there's more likelihood that a downed player will see the value in putting out a beacon and being rescued, over just hitting backspace when they find themselves incapped. So my goal in this video is to give you a quick breakdown of medical mechanics, and show you how to set yourself up well to deliver on your promises of salvation. Before we get into that, I just want to say that while we'll look at various ships that can help you on your way to being the ultimate first responder, they're all nice to haves and not need to haves, and they can be bought in game for a UEC. If the medic's life gets you excited, and you want to dive into SC, then all you need is a $45 starter pack. Just be sure to use someone's referral code when you create an account to get some extra startup capital to buy a med gun. Mine's the one up on screen, but if you've got any mates who play already, just ask them for theirs. First up, let's take a look at some basic medical mechanics in the game. Essentially, when someone takes enough damage to take their HP down to 0, there's a relatively high chance that they will enter an incapacitated state, as opposed to instantly dying. There are some exceptions to this rule. If you're in a ship that hard deaths in a fiery explosion, you're guaranteed to hard death yourself. And similarly, falling from a significant height is far more likely to send you straight to a respawn. But assuming your cause of death was a little less severe and fiery, you'll likely find yourself incapacitated, or incapped. The downed player then has the option to either hold backspace to respawn without their gear, or hold M to send out a medical beacon. If they choose the beacon, then this will send a mission out server-wide which other players can pick up and respond to. The standardized payout is a princely 15,000 credits, so just like in the real world, I'm afraid, becoming a paramedic is not a get-rich-quick scheme. When you get downed, there's also a chance that you might suffer an injury to one of your body parts. Injuries are tiered in the same pattern as medical beds, running from Tier 3, the least severe, to Tier 1, the most severe. Injuries cause debilitating effects. For example, a leg injury will impair your movement, while a head injury might cause clouded vision. The more severe the injury, the more severe the debuff. In order to cure injuries and remove the associated debuffs, you'll need to use a medical bed. So Tier 1 beds, as found at the medical clinics of space stations and hospitals of major LZs, can treat Tier 1 injuries and everything below. Tier 2 beds, as found on the Carrack and the 890 jump, can treat Tier 2 and Tier 3 injuries, while Tier 3 beds, as found on the Cutlass Red and Pisces C8R, can only be used to treat Tier 3 injuries. All medical beds will also provide healing, as well as increasing your food and water, but you might notice that if you've sustained an injury, that you won't be able to heal to maximum health until you get that treated. So while a medical bed might be needed to fully treat injuries, you can mask their effects using drugs. These can be dispensed using either the various coloured med pens, or a paramed medical device, more commonly referred to as a medgun. There is a third option. There's an attachment that you can buy for the multi-tool from Cure Life, and this could be used in a pinch, but realistically most of us can carry around a multi-tool as well as a medical gun at the current point. Red Hemazole pens are your basic med pen, designed to stop bleeding and replenish hit points, removing the incapacitated state if the player is downed. This graphic then also shows the other drugs available and the effects that they're designed to mask. However, your truest friend as a medic is a medgun, since this provides an all-in-one solution and will automatically assign the correct drugs to mask any injuries. Personally, I feel this is a bit of a cop-out in terms of game design. The medgun has an automatic mode, but also an advanced manual mode, which can be accessed by aiming down sights and interacting with this slider to select the drugs to administer. But this is rendered useless by the fact that the medgun can detect injuries and administer the right drugs itself in auto mode. I for one would like to see a reversion to the older model, where the medgun automatically dispenses Hemazole for healing, but there's an opportunity for skilled medical players to learn the effects of the other drugs and administer them selectively to treat a casualty. Still, this is the system we have for now, so unless you really want to learn these intricacies, you really don't have to. One thing you do have to be a bit careful on when dosing up your patient is where their blood drug level is getting to. This can be seen in the medgun HUD and by the player in the bottom left of their screen. Each dose will increase the BDL level, and push it too high and you'll suffer negative effects like swaying and blurred vision. However, this only hits at pretty high levels of 70% plus, so just healing someone up and masking a few injuries for the short term won't cause any of these issues. Equipped with this knowledge, it's time to think about gearing ourselves up for a medical rescue mission. In the current iteration of the game, 9 times out of 10 your patient is going to have got themselves downed during an FPS mission in a bunker or a cave. In almost every situation, there are still going to be bad guys with guns roaming around near their body. So I'd recommend a set of heavy armour and some no-nonsense weaponry. I'd personally prefer an FS9 LMG as my main weapon, decked out with a 2x scope, compensated to control recoil and a laser sight. Entirely optional is extra backup weapons. The one thing that could be useful is having a weapon with a suppressor attached in case a lot of enemies are still up and you want to take a quieter approach to reach your target. Additionally, make sure you've got your med gun, some med pens, and a multi-tool with a tractor beam attachment equipped. For a bare bones rescue, literally any ship will do. Theoretically, a medical rescue could be achieved in an Aurora as long as you've got a med pen to your name. However, a number of ships can make the job that much more professional. The Anvil Pisces C8R is advertised as the profession starter for medical gameplay, and with its high speed in Atmo and tier 3 medical bed, it could be a perfect way to get going. In a lot of cases when responding to med beacons, bringing a med bed is a nice to have, but not necessarily a need to have. Primarily the person seeking assistance is just going to need to be revived, and once back up they can take themselves off to a station for treatment if they need it. However, if you can offer healing, that might help save some time and be a bit of a bonus. Don't get me wrong with what I'm about to say, I think the C8R is a fantastic ship, I've raved about it a good few times on this channel already. But for those seeking to do medical rescues in the current iteration of Star Citizen, I wouldn't actually recommend it for 2 reasons. Number 1, it has a size 1 QT drive. You have no control over where a downed player is going to be, and over nearly every distance in Stanton, a ship equipped with a size 2 XL1 drive is going to be quicker. And number 2, the C8R cannot hold a ground vehicle. Most medical rescues are going to be people downed in bunkers, and since they can't share the mission with you when they're in a down state, that means you'll be a target for the bunker's AA weaponry if you fly too close. Bunker turrets will target you from around 2 kilometers, and while with some fancy piloting and use of terrain you might be able to land closer than that without getting yourself blown up, the best way by far is to land and use a ground vehicle to get in without getting shot. And for those 2 reasons, my main recommendation is the Drake Cutlass Red. Not only does the Cutty Red also pack tier 3 medbeds, allowing you to offer that cherry on top of your rescue mission, it addresses the C8R's main setbacks. Its size 2 drive slot allows it to pack an XL1 drive, and the rear compartment between the main ramp and the first door is the perfect size to accommodate a Greycat STV, allowing you to land and drive to your target's location safely even when they're downed in a bunker. With this in mind, there are a number of non-medically focused ships that I would also consider, including things like the Base Cutty Black, the Crusader MSR, or a Misk Freelancer. Basically anything which can fit a ground vehicle and that size 2 drive, and I'd take any of those over a C8R if I'm specifically focusing medical rescue. One that a lot of people might point out at this point though is the Anvil Carrack, and sure enough, if you've got a TS2 equipped, it can make long journeys quickly. It's got plenty of room for ground vehicles, and the tier 2 medbed is an upgrade on the Cutty Red's tier 3, allowing you to heal more injuries. If you've got a character hand, then of course it's a great ship. I'd only say that if you're looking for rapid response, then it could be considered overkill. It's a bit slow in atmo compared with the smaller ships, finding a suitable landing spot can take a bit more time, and getting from the bridge down to the garage is a wee bit of a trek. Plus, I don't know that I'd necessarily recommend a 26 million credit ship purely for medical rescue gameplay, when it's easily achievable for a fraction of that cost. However, if you're looking to buy a Carrack because of its multifunctionality, then by all means go for it. Side note, just for anyone typing, what about the 890 jump? Yes, it does have a tier 2 medbed, but all of the above weak points related to the Carrack apply. Also, slap on another 6 million credits or so, and factor in that you have an absolute dog of a jump drive that you can't upgrade because it's a capital component. Sure, you're going to arrive in style, but by the time you do, your patient will probably have given up hope of you ever reaching them and backspaced. And my final recommendation for your preparation is to buddy up. Medical rescues are not about making cash, they're about the gameplay. So whether or not you split that 15k payout really shouldn't matter. But what does really suck is when you go and try and help someone out, only to fall victim to the same mysteriously SAS level 9tails member who took them out in the first place. And one medical rescue all of a sudden becomes 2. Trust me, from experience, that can be quite embarrassing. Going together with a friend vastly improves your odds of success, allowing someone to keep their gun up while the other one deals with the patient. Plus, sorry if you've watched some of my other vids and I'm entering broken record territory, playing with other people is fun. I'm going to be teaming up with my mates Skelleh and Northace for this one. If you're flying solo and you're looking for folks to get involved with, then please feel free to swing by the Frontier Community Discord. We're even developing a rapid response wing within our organisation, Frontier Consolidated, that's just going to be focused on rescue missions. Though it is worth saying that there's absolutely no pressure to join the org, you're completely free to just hang out in the community. One feature we do have that's worth calling a bit of attention to in this vid is a private medical rescue beacon. Because while most people responding to medical rescue beacons have the best intentions, you might be a bit wary of announcing to an entire server of strangers that you're defenseless, and since you're keen not to backspace, that you might have some decent loot on you. Over on our Discord, anyone from the community is welcome to send up a distress call that will be picked up and dealt with by vetted members of our org. So, you're all prepped, you've got together with your mates, now what? Well, you're effectively now on call, and while you might be ready to respond to a beacon, that doesn't necessarily mean there is one. You could server hop looking for someone in need, but as a good sign of how willing the community is to help each other out, medical rescue beacons tend to be snapped up and dealt with pretty quickly. My recommendation would be to get on with your day while you're waiting. If you're prepared like this, then you're also perfectly set up to run bunkers while you wait to see if your rescue services are required. And since you're not going to be raking in the space cash being a paramedic, it can pay to have a more lucrative side hustle dispensing justice. When on call, I'd tend to stick to the more central systems of either Hurston or Crusader though. There's no telling where that beacon's going to pop, so doing this just minimises the journey time wherever we're needed. You'll get a pop-up like this on your HUD when a medical rescue beacon's activated, telling you which player is actually seeking assistance. You can go and grab these in your Mobiglass, but like I said, they tend to go quick, so if you're keen on getting them, just hit the left square bracket to accept directly from the HUD. So I'm going to level with you before any eagle-eyed person spots this and calls me out on it. As I'm sure many of you will appreciate, I've got a few hundred other things going on in my real life, and when it comes to making videos, I tend to set aside specific parcels of time to make them. So in this case, to guarantee that we got a beacon, our patient Max Overload is also a mate of mine. And in a true sign of friendship, he was willing to take on the role of casualty, heading down into a bunker and getting particularly careless. However, we've made every effort to really set this up as exactly what you would see in the real world. So while accepting that this conversation is somewhat canned, it's here to highlight a key point, and that's to communicate with your patient. There's nothing worse as the downed player than someone snapping up your beacon, then not saying a word as you watch their marker flit around 30 million kilometers away from you. Let them know that you've got their beacon, that you're on the way, provide them with a time estimate, and to make things easier, open up your comm link with F11, find their name in the server list and drop them a party invite. You'll need to be the one to do this, since they'll lose access to their mobiGlas when in-capped, but they'll be able to see and accept the party invite from their HUD. This will then allow you to communicate with them in party chat, so open up your chat with enter, then press tab until you get to party, and type in there. Ask them about their situation. What type of location are they in? Are there any hostiles around? Are they NPCs, or was it a PvP situation? It can really pay to just know what you're walking into. One thing that might put some people off trying out medical rescue is the fear that it could be a trap. And yes, particularly unscrupulous individuals may use medical beacons to lure unsuspecting medics to their doom. This is a tiny fraction of the player base, so insignificant that you shouldn't let it put you off. That being said, it never hurts to be just a bit careful. So if while you were on call, you were keeping busy running bunkers and you've got a ship full of looted goodies, there's absolutely no harm in swinging by a station on your way to the beacon to transfer that loot into the station inventory. If you head out with gear you don't mind losing, you're not really taking any risk. A neat little trick to save a tiny bit of time. Since we're going to the moon Yela, our nav computer will have plotted a first jump to the planet Crusader, then a second jump onto Yela. But as soon as we're within the outermost ring of the planetary system, we can cut the jump by holding B, and then we'll be allowed to plot a direct course to Yela without travelling all the way into the planet. When plotting a jump down to his location on the moon, we want to make sure that we target the bunker itself, not Max's marker. Since he's deep underground, jumping to him directly can cause the navigation to mess up and take our ship straight into the moon, which would not be the perfect way to end a rescue attempt. Keeping in mind the AA turrets at the bunker, we'll land about 2 kilometers away, then hop into the STV and make the rest of the journey on the ground. One issue you might face is that, since you don't have the mission, security guards will view you as hostile too. Your best bet to avoid picking up a crime stat is to move past them quickly. In extremis, you can use melee attacks which rank as CS1 and CS2 to knock out guards. Bad guys though, you can cap with no issue. If your patient's in a more open area, it can pay to bring them back to cover before attempting to res. Use your tractor beam to bring them into a safe spot rather than reviving them where they lie, particularly since that might be in the line of fire of hidden enemies that were the ones who took them down in the first place. If you only have med pens as opposed to a gun, you can also revive someone by equipping that and right-clicking when close by. But in our instance, we're just going to use the med gun and just beam him. If your newly standing patient does have any injuries, then you can offer to treat them in your ship. They can always just follow you back for treatment on board if you've got med beds. But as mentioned, this is a nice to have rather than a need to have. If they're back up and walking around, you have done your job. So there we have it, all the knowledge you need to form your own response unit and get the needy of Stanton back up and running. And while rescuers right now are mostly paid in thank yous, I can see it becoming a much more integral and valuable part of the game as we get features like Death of a Spaceman and players are increasingly keen to avoid hitting backspace. I realise that to some the build-up might seem excessive versus the actual running of a rescue mission, but I think that almost more than anywhere else in Star Citizen, medical rescue is an example of the 5 Ps. Proper planning prevents poor performance. Admittedly, in the version I originally learned of that there's a 6th P, but this is a family show. If you did enjoy the vid, and you think I've earned it, then dropping a like and subscribing would be amazing. And since word of mouth is hugely important, sharing this vid with your friends, org mates, and your uncle who loves Wii U lights would be awesome as well. But with all that said, thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.